Good day, everyone. My name is Marta Kindres, and I'm a Director of Advocacy and IT Industry Development Center at the IT Ukraine. We are delighted to welcome you to today's webinar, Insights into Expanding Cooperations in the UK, organized by the IT Ukraine Association in cooperation with our long-standing legal partner, Asters, and the international law firm, Kennedys. United Kingdom remains one of the most attractive and stable destinations for the international expansions of Ukrainian IT business, and it was showed by our annual research Digital Tiger. The UK consistently ranks among our top 5 export destinations, with the annual export exceed $200 million. We are grateful to our partners from Kennedy and Asters, and I give the floor to Oleksiy Uros, Business Development Director at Asters and Vice President on Legal Affairs of the IT Ukraine Association, for co-hosting this event. Let's begin our agenda.
Yeah, Marta, thanks a lot. Hello, everyone. It's pleasure to see you. In addition, that Marta said, we also visited London a few times this and previous year on London UK Tech Week. We have a lot of partners. UK market is very attractive for majority of IT Ukraine Association members. What we know from the feedback, that's why we decided to suggest I guess a potential very interesting and important video call with our close friends, being regarding international rankings, we are the largest and the number one in majority of rankings law firm. We work closely specifically with Kennedy Law, because Kennedy is a worldwide well-known law firm. I guess I can rank as the most friendship to Ukraine, yes, friendly to Ukraine law firm. I mean, if you will put Kennedy Law in the Google search, it will be correct, because they made and continue making a lot for our country, including this webinar. I want to introduce shortly our colleagues. I will start from our main contact in Kennedy, my close friend, our partner, Oleg Shaulko. I guess he is a representative and main contact for cooperation with Ukraine market. In Kennedy Law also, I want to introduce colleagues of Kennedy Law, Mr. Matthew Poli, Mr. Christopher Young, and Nathalie Moreno. It's our speakers panel today. I will smoothly transfer my speech to Oleg. Oleg will describe a little more deeply about Kennedy Law, what they're doing now, and we can go through the topic we agreed to explore today.
Thank you very much, Marta. Thank you, Oleksiy. On behalf of Kennedy's Law, it's a pleasure to participate in this webinar. And we know that IT industry in Ukraine produces a lot of talents and a lot of products. And we see on the UK side that those products are now entering the global stage and a global business. And this conference or webinar is all about helping the Ukrainian startups, the Ukrainian companies to succeed on a global stage. Thank you for your complimentary introduction, Oleksiy. Yeah, indeed, Kennedy is one of the top Google searches. If you go to Google, you can check yourself. But that's not because we pay for the Google algorithms. That's because we're consistently supporting Ukrainian initiatives and Ukrainian projects. And that's also beyond our historic involvement into the Ukrainian business. Kennedy's Law known predominantly for our insurance litigation expertise, but as you will learn in this call, we will be talking about general business and protection of the interests of the business in general, not necessarily related to insurance products. And I think it's a good time to have the webinar on this topic because of the war. A lot of Ukrainian IT companies are now trying to expand. So it's for the bad reason, but this is happening, and this is quite a positive dynamic. So my colleagues and myself will try to present UK as a potential destination for the business. And we'll give you a particular view from our end why we think the UK is a good option for the Ukrainian business. And then obviously after the conference, we'll be happy to answer any of your questions on ad hoc basis if you have one. So feel free to contact Marta, Oleksiy, or myself. And Marta, over to you in terms of the agenda.
You're on mute, Marta.
Oh, there is a problem with the mute, I think. So maybe we can kick off with Matthew Poli, who will explain the basics of the establishing the business in the UK. And then we'll move smoothly to Christopher Young, who will be talking about the tax issues. I will take the microphone afterwards, talking about the litigation, protection of the litigation rights or rights in courts. And we will finish with Dr. Nathalie Moreno with the artificial intelligence stack and general cybersecurity.
Thanks, Oleg. Marta, Oleksiy again, thank you very much for the kind introduction to be part of this webinar. We hope everyone attending finds it useful. And once more to echo what Oleg has said, Kennedys are extremely grateful to be here and to show our continuing support for Ukraine and Ukrainian businesses. So, as a brief introduction, my name is Matthew Poli, and I'm a partner in the transactions and advisory team here at Kennedys, based in London, and I specialise in corporate law. Now, I'm only going to be with you for a very short time, only 5 minutes, but during that time, I want to talk to you all about why the UK may be considered to be an attractive destination for IT businesses. Now, looking at that question, I think the answer to it needs to be split into two parts. Firstly, to consider the attractiveness of the UK for businesses generally, and secondly, what the UK is doing to support the tech industry specifically. So taking the first of the 2 points, the UK's general attractiveness, the UK has an extremely business-friendly environment. The government of the UK offers various incentives for business, such as tax relief on research and development activities, something that I know Chris is going to touch on later. Incentives for employees, such as tax advantageous share option schemes to allow employees to participate in the ownership of the businesses for whom they work. And for investors and owners of businesses, such as EIS relief and business asset disposal relief when the time comes to sell. The UK also has a relatively low corporate tax rate when compared to other European countries, which makes it an appealing location for companies looking to set up their operations. So moving beyond the environment more generally, the UK has an extremely favourable legal and regulatory framework. The systems we have here are mature and well established and are generally considered to be transparent and stable, which is reassuring for international businesses. The UK itself ranks 20th on the Global Corruptions Perceptions Index, and it has entrenched laws around anti-bribery, anti-corruption and anti-money laundering. And furthermore, laws around intellectual property and data privacy are embedded in our business culture, and that offers a clear framework for handling data and for protecting it. The UK also has terrific access for funding. The UK is an international financial hub with strong access to institutional investors, venture capitalists, angel investors, and other funding opportunities, which can include traditional debt. The UK's robust financial services industry, coupled with the reliefs and incentives, some of which I've already mentioned, can make it easy for startups and tech firms to secure finance to help them scale. And the last point I'd like to raise, just in very high level terms, is the quality of life. It's generally accepted that the UK offers a relatively high quality of life, if not quality of weather, which is attractive to both international and local talent. With cultural diversity, a world-class healthcare system, which is generally free at the point of use, and a strong infrastructure, it is considered a desirable place for professionals and their families to move to live and to work. So having covered off the points which apply, I'd say, to all businesses, we look now at the things that are more specific to IT and tech. Well, the UK has a thriving tech innovation and research environment, with institutions dovetailing with global universities to focus on AI, fintech, insurtech, cybersecurity, and other emerging technologies. For example, the UK is a global leader in fintech, and London, Oxford, and Cambridge are home to numerous fintech businesses, both startup and extremely well established. The UK government has committed to supporting the tech industry through initiatives such as its Digital Development Strategy 2024 to 2030. This strategy includes significant investment on digital infrastructure, innovation, and support for digital businesses. The country also supports the tech sector through funding programs, partnerships, and collaborations between private and the public sector. Specifically, with regard to AI, Keir Starmer, the UK's Prime Minister, has set out the UK's AI Action Plan in January of this year. And the plan of that is to make the UK the #1 place in the world for AI firms to invest and grow. It includes specialist policies to forge new AI growth zones by speeding up planning proposals to build more physical IT infrastructure, such as data centres. It intends to increase the public compute capacity by 20-fold to provide the necessary processing power to embrace these new technologies. It intends to create a new national data library to safely and securely unlock the value inherent in public data. And it intends to establish a dedicated AI Energy Council, the intention of which is to work with energy companies to understand the energy demands and challenges that are going to fuel the new development of AI technology. And this announcement of the UK's AI Action Plan came at the same time as 3 major tech companies, Vantage Data Centres, Nscale and Kyndryl, committed a £14 billion investment in the UK to build on its AI infrastructure. So overall, a combination of these factors, strong infrastructure, access to talent and funding, supportive environment for innovation, and the legal and regulatory system, and indeed more, make the UK a compelling destination for IT businesses to grow and to thrive. And of course, Kennedy's are here to support you with all aspects of that establishment or expansion into the UK. And with thanks to you all for listening, that's my high-level summary. Next on the list, I believe, is you, Chris. So I'd like to hand over to you, if I may.
It is. Thank you, Matt. Fantastic presentation, Matt. Really highlighting some fantastic points. By way of a short introduction about myself, my name is Christopher Young, and I'm a Senior Associate in the Tax Disputes and Investigations team here at Kennedy's. Matt has just delivered a fantastic presentation which explains why the UK is a great place to come and do business if you are in the IT sector. What I'm going to sort of focus on is, by building on the things that Matt has said, is to hopefully talk you through and explain to you about some of the tax advantages that are available in the UK and how those tax advantages can really encourage and have been put in place to really encourage growth, both in terms of established companies, but also in terms of startups and startups transitioning from a small company into a large company. So, as Matt has said, the UK government is actively promoting the UK as a tech-first jurisdiction, particularly post-Brexit, and they're looking to bring in targeted support for startups and businesses that are looking to scale in the tech sector particularly. How does it do that? Well, Matt's already talked about several advantages of coming to the UK, but one of the main ways in which a government in most nations is able to encourage a particular industry or a particular type of industry is by offering tax breaks. And the UK government has a plethora of of tax relief available that I think would be very interesting to a lot of IT startup businesses and indeed more established businesses that are looking to scale. By way of a headline overview, the UK's corporation tax rate as of of April 2023 is set at 25% for businesses with profits of more than £50,000, and for businesses with profits under £50,000, there's a marginal relief which is at 19% for corporation tax rates. Now, despite the recent increase in 2023 to 25%, the UK still remains the lowest headline corporation tax rate in the G7. And another key point to note is that in the UK, corporation tax is only applied to profits made by a particular company or a particular entity within a relevant accounting period. What that means is that there is an opportunity before year end to invest money back into your business, therefore reducing your profit and reducing the amount of corporation tax that you'd have to pay in a given year. This is fundamental to a lot of sort of smaller businesses that are looking to scale and grow, because it enables you to sort of keep money in your business. In some other nations, sort of corporation tax can often be charged on revenue, which is obviously a bit detrimental to growth. And what we do in the UK is obviously by encouraging that, not having that system, you can retain some of your capital, reinvest it in whatever you want to reinvest it in, your people, in your infrastructure, and pay a lower amount of corporation tax by reducing your profit in a given period. Really sort of small corporation tax rate, lowest in the G7, and that's an attractive proposition to a lot of businesses who are looking to set up in a jurisdiction that is outside of the EU and outside of the US. The UK is perfectly placed to bridge that gap. In relation to other potential reliefs, the UK government has had for a long time now another particular scheme in relation to where companies are able to obtain tax relief on any expenditure that they incur in relation to research and development projects. Now, it's a government incentive that's looked to encourage companies to invest in innovation, obviously right into the sweet spot of the IT sector, because you can obtain tax relief by investing in developing new technologies, improving existing processes, and indeed solving scientific and technical challenges. The scheme works by essentially the company will keep a record of the expenditure that it has spent on a particular project, and then by without going into too much detail on it, by going to a scaling process and by a particular type of calculation, companies can gain up to 20% tax credit on qualifying R&D spend, but depending on the size of the company, that can be scaled up to sometimes over 230%. So therefore, in theory, providing you meet the necessary criteria, your £1 spend in an R&D project could earn you £2.30 against your corporation tax liability for that particular period. In addition to the research and development, they also have the patent box scheme, which allows companies to apply for a reduced rate of 10% corporation tax on their profits, depending on whether they can meet the relevant criteria in relation to visiting the criteria as an IP or a tech business that's developed IP in the UK. So again, another really attractive proposition here, that if you're a business that's set up in the UK and you're developing and generating IP, providing you meet certain criteria, you can apply to reduce your corporation tax rate down to 10%, which is again another very beneficial scheme for the corporate entity. What we're also going to move on to is look at tax incentives and advantages that's available to encourage investment in tech businesses. The main sort of three schemes available to investors in this area is what was touched on by Matt previously. One is called the Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme, also known as SEIS. And what this does is this gives investors tax breaks on money that they invest in a small startup business, providing, of course, the necessary criteria is met. The investors can get up to 50% of their investment back by way of a tax credit, which also allows access for small businesses to generate investment, which will allow them to grow, to scale, and to hopefully develop as a business. The Enterprise Investment Scheme, also known as the EIS, is also something that's available and is very similar to the Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme. The Enterprise Investment Scheme tends to target businesses that are slightly more mature, so past the seed investment stage, but now looking to generate investment in order to scale. Slightly less beneficial than the SEIS scheme, but works in a very similar way. The EIS scheme allows investors to obtain 30% income tax relief on their investment. So in other words, whatever you invest, providing the relevant criteria is met, the investor is given a tax credit of 30% of their investment, which can be offset against their income for a given period. Obviously, another way to really encourage investment, but this is more in terms of not just seed startup companies, but we're now looking at companies that are going from, fairly well established, but now looking to scale to become bigger. So again, that's another option that's available to investors, and also a way to entice investors to invest in your business should you decide to set up in the UK. Matt also touched on incentives for employees and dividend, so for employees. Two main ways, but obviously one of the main issues, particularly in the IT sector from businesses that I've worked with, is the retention of talent. You have some fantastic employees, and obviously what you want to do is retain them. You want to keep them interested and keep them with your business. You want to keep that talent within the business and not lose it to competitors. And by sort of enacting employee incentives, such as in the UK, the employee share scheme, whereby employees are allowed to be given shares in the company that they are working for with tax relief benefits on that, and keeps them obviously motivated in order to, if they have shares in the company, they're motivated for the company to be a success, because obviously their share price will increase, and you also have tax breaks on that. In addition to that, they can also obtain dividends on the shares that they hold, and indeed, find they're going to, this scheme is set up in a certain way, there can be tax breaks available for employees. So again, another way in which you can incentivize your employees and hopefully retain them in the business. And that allows obviously the business to invest, because it has a lot more stable structure. And it can look to move on. The other thing to mention, which I think is relevant to IT businesses, is that there is a digital services tax in the UK. However, it's currently only at a rate of 2%. It only applies to multinational tech companies. So albeit you need to be aware of it, it's not the UK's aim to target small startup or small businesses with the digital services tax. It's largely aimed at companies with more than 500 million global revenue or 25 million plus UK digital services revenue. So again, this is another way that the UK government can be seen to be encouraging smaller businesses, particularly in the IT sector, to set up in the UK, because it doesn't apply the digital services tax to the smaller businesses, or indeed the small to medium-sized businesses. So just as a quick summary of why the UK for IT companies, and without going over too much of what Matt said, we have the lowest effective tax rate, headline tax rate of corporation tax in the G7. There are several reliefs available in order to encourage investment, as well as tax reliefs available for small to medium-sized businesses. And we also have very generous investment incentives, including the SIS, EIS, and venture capitals. And we also have several schemes available, which will enable you to incentivize your employees and hopefully retain your talent by giving them tax breaks and keeping them with the company. Our regulatory environment is very attractive. It's common law, it's light touch. We haven't got as many regulators as you'll see in the US or indeed in Europe. We're trying to encourage and be flexible, so our regulatory framework, albeit is obviously of the highest quality, is also quite flexible. We have access to capital, we have access to talent. Some of the best universities in the world are in the UK. And on top of that, you also have global connectivity, whether that be due to time zone or treaty networks, or indeed the language. We are sort of very much a hub for IT businesses, and that's supported by the UK government, who, as we've just discussed, is offering several tax incentives to businesses that want to come and start and join the UK. Hopefully that hasn't been too boring. I appreciate it's tax, so do bear with me. I will be here for questions at the end, but thank you for listening to my presentation, and I'll hand over to, I think, Nathalie.
Thank you, Chris. Absolutely. It's a real pleasure to join this webinar from the UK, from London. My name is Nathalie Moreno. I'm a partner at Kennedy's, specialized in data protection, cybersecurity, and artificial intelligence. I work with global clients as well as startups across many sectors, including technology, financial services, insurance, and life sciences. So today I want to give you a practical overview of these three legal areas that are essential, I believe, for Ukrainian IT businesses working with UK clients. And I mean data protection, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity. And there's a lot happening in the UK in the legal and regulatory space. So to keep things clear, I thought I would take each topic in turn, and for each one, I'll start with some overview of the EU laws, since I assume most of you may be familiar with the GDPR, and then highlight what's different or is just changing in the UK. And that way you can probably better manage dual compliance if you happen to be active both in the EU and the UK markets. So let's start with data protection. So if you already know the EU GDPR, that's a good start, because the UK GDPR is almost identical to the EU GDPR. So all the core principles apply. In the UK GDPR, you need a lawful basis to process personal data. You must respect data subject rights, individuals. You must follow the core principles of lawfulness, fairness, transparency, purpose limitation, data minimization, accuracy, storage limitation, security, and accountability. These are the 7 main GDPR principles. And then there's also the same data breach rule that you need to notify within 72 hours the UK regulator in case of a data breach, and the UK regulator is the ICO. So this is the same as the EU GDPR. Now, what's different in the UK? We do have a separate Data Protection Act adopted in 2018, which supplements the UK GDPR. So that's a bit of a divergence here. It provides specific rules for HR data, public sector bodies, law enforcement, intelligence services, and criminal offense data. And there's also some national exemptions and restrictions which are specific to the UK. Now, when it comes to international transfers, transferring personal data from the UK outside the UK, there are actually UK-specific rules. So you probably are familiar with the EU standard contractual clauses. When it comes to transferring data from the UK outside the UK to jurisdictions not deemed adequate, the UK has put in place, in addition to the EU SCCs, a UK addendum, an international data transfer agreement. So you may use the UK-specific contracts, or you may use a combination of the EU SCCs with a UK addendum. That's how it's called. Now, if you're doing business with the UK, but you don't have a company in the UK, and you are targeting, in accordance to EU or to UK law, individuals, then you will need to have a UK representative based in the UK, and that would be to comply with Article 27 of the UK GDPR. And finally, we also have something different from the EU. In the UK, you need to pay a data protection fee and register with the UK regulator, the ICO, if you are processing UK personal data. So that's something you may be familiar. Now, here's the big update. What's changing now? We just had a new UK data use and access bill, which received royal assent last week on the 19th of June. It's not replacing the existing data protection laws, but it reforms part of the UK GDPR, the Data Protection Act, and also e-privacy regulations on marketing. So I would say there's lots of changes, but I'm going to focus on what is changing in the UK and is different from the EU, for instance, is the Act is going to create a legal framework for the rollout of smart data schemes in regulated sectors. So some sectors like energy, telecoms, financial services will be required to share customer data in a machine-readable format with what will be authorized third parties. So that's the background, if you want, for open banking data, for instance, and that's something that the UK is at the forefront of. Then there's also the Act also establishes the legal foundation of a digital identity framework in the UK. So we're creating a legal basis for trusted digital ID providers. That's also going to be a big market in the UK. There's a change to the international data transfer rules that I've just explained. You probably are familiar with the adequacy framework in the EU, where either you're deemed to comply with essentially EU data protection laws or you're not. But the UK is now changing the standard. Now, in order to be able to receive data from the UK, the data protection laws will need not to be materially lower than the UK data protection laws. So it's a change of the threshold, and that actually means that it may be more likely that the UK could issue an adequacy decision for Ukraine in the future. There's also some new rules on the reuse of personal data, and that's something very tricky currently, is when you receive personal data under certain legal bases, you need to comply with a lot of restrictive conditions under the EU GDPR. Under the new act, there's going to be a compatibility presumption if certain safeguards are met. So I really suggest you look into that, because it just makes it easier to reuse data in general. And then the Act is all about making business easier and less red tape in the UK. There's also going to be the removal of the requirement to set up a record of processing activities if the activities you're running are not high risk. So that's also going to be a kind of a relief. And then there's kind of a big change when it comes to automated decision making. So for instance, if you are providing services, IT services, including automated decision making, the new act is reversing the prohibition from the EU GDPR, because under the new regime, automated decision making will be permitted in certain cases with safeguards, as opposed to being prohibited unless some conditions were met. And that will be safeguards around transparency and the ability to contest any decision made based on ADM. So what I suggest you do now, considering that there's been quite an important update, it would probably be useful for Ukrainian business to review what are your UK data flows and the lawful basis on which you are providing services using personal data. Check what type of transfer mechanisms you're using. It could be SCCs, EU SCCs, or you may be just using the UK instruments like the International Data Transfer Agreement or the UK Addendum. Make sure, obviously, that you have a proper compliant incident response plan. If there's a cyber attack, if there's a data breach, you need to be able to demonstrate that you have a plan. And then start preparing for the DUA Act. It's called the Data Use and Access Act that I've just summarized, because it will come into force gradually. So that's a big change. That moving on to artificial intelligence, because I'm sure a lot of you will be interested to know what is mandatory when it comes to the use of AI products or services. And there's a big difference here between the UK and the EU regulatory approach to AI. What's the same when considering with the EU is that the UK GDPR is going to apply when any AI system is going to process personal data. And we know that that's going to be the majority of the case. So that's not a big difference between the UK and the EU, because you must have a lawful basis to be able to train personal data as part of an AI system. And you should also implement a data protection impact assessment whenever your AI services or product means high risk processing. And there is obviously the famous Article 22 of the UK GDPR, which is now amended by the UK DUA Act, which means that solely automated decisions, which comes with legal or significant effects on individuals, need to come with specific safeguards in place, which to allow individuals to contest any decision made without human intervention. So you can request human intervention. So what's different in the UK is that we don't have any EU AI Act, which you probably know is binding and has started being into force since August last year. However, we do have a sectoral approach, which means that every sector regulator here in the UK has provided some relevant AI guidance for their sector. Obviously, we know the ICO, the UK regulator for data protection, is focusing on privacy and data-driven AI, but the Financial Conduct Authority has also issued relevant guidance for AI in fraud detection or credit scoring. In the healthcare sector, we have the MHRA, which has issued guidance on healthcare and medical devices. The Ofcom is working on some guidance on AI for telecoms businesses, and there's been already some relevant guidance from the Competition and Market Authority, the competition regulator, guidance on AI. So the whole idea is to create some flexibility when it comes to AI regulations in the UK. However, what we can expect this year actually would be some UK formal guidance on AI and also a future bill which has been in the pipeline for, I would say, a year and a half or 2 years, I think. So either this UK AI bill will land this year or it will land next year. It's supposed to be formalizing cross-sector coordination because, as you can see, it's quite fragmented. It will establish clear transparency duties and risk-based regulatory obligations when it comes to all the regulators. The UK ICO is actually preparing a statutory code of practice on AI and data protection, and we'll expect it by the end of this year. This will be to clarify, and is very needed, how to meet UK GDPR obligations in areas such as automated decision making, which, as you heard, has been amended by the new DUA Act, and then just clarify what level of explainability is required when providing, deploying, distributing AI systems. And then the UK government is also developing an AI risk classification framework, which is going to be different from the classification framework set up by the EU AI Act. It will be more aligned with international standards like those set up by the OECD, G7, etc. And then we're expecting some specific guidance from the UK regulator on AI around bias and fairness assessments, on building explainability into AI outputs, and then ensuring effective human oversight. These are all very complicating areas that require probably clear guidance from the regulators in the UK. So what should you do now as a UK AI vendor? then probably start working on building proper explainability around your AI products or services, because this is a big issue for UK buyers. If you are in scope, complete the data protection impact assessment and then track what the forthcoming guidance I mentioned from the UK regulators. And then last but not least, I will finish on cybersecurity. In the UK, it's absolutely critical, especially in regulated sectors, I would say, like finance, infrastructure, and digital services. So when it comes to cybersecurity and its interplay with the GDPR, the EU and the UK is the same, because controllers and processors are required to implement appropriate technical and organization security measures. If there's a breach, you are a personal data breach, you're required to notify the regulator within 72 hours. So this is the same thing. Now, what's different in the UK, however, is we have a separate regulation, the Network and Information System Regulation 2018, which applies to operators of essential services and for relevant digital service providers, which also comes with a data breach notification, which is specific to those types of businesses. And we have a kind of a new law, which is the Product Security and Telecommunications Infrastructure Act, which imposes security rules for consumer connected products. So if you're in the IoT business, then this is a regulation which will apply to your products. There's also new laws coming or currently underway in the UK. We're expecting a cybersecurity and resilience bill, which is due this year, actually, which is going to expand the scope of the UK NIS regime I just mentioned, and it will actually include managed service providers, SaaS vendors, and other critical digital services. So that's one to watch. And there's also a new critical third-party regime in financial services law, which is coming. That also is very important, especially if you're working with financial services, banks in general. So when it comes to cybersecurity, clearly the question is to become compliant with the UK GDPR data breach incident notification regime, to familiarize yourself, if you're in scope, with the NIS regulations, and if you're providing IoT products, the PSTI Act. Monitor as and when the cybersecurity and resilience bill lands, and then go back to, in terms of final recommendations, try to do your mapping around the data you process and whether you are transferring that data from the UK to other jurisdictions. Update your privacy documentations, meaning privacy notices, records if you're in scope, data protection impact assessments. Get your cybersecurity incident response in good shape and understanding which laws you are subject to, and then review your contract compliance with your customers, because all these laws need to be reflected, at least the obligations coming from these laws need to be reflected in your terms and conditions or your customer contracts. Thanks very much. I'm happy to take questions if we have from the audience.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Nathalie. Thank you. That was, sorry.
Ola, it's your floor. Yes, current positive shifts for IT business in digital assets and IP regulations, the last but not least.
Thank you very much, Marta. So just to capitalize on what my colleagues were saying, and I know that my colleagues were talking about the time for the IT business where the business is growing and everybody in the organizations are pretty much happy, and there is a positive dynamic in the business. I'm Oleg Shaulko, and I'm sitting within the commercial disputes department. And My role on this presentation is to explain how the IT business can benefit from a judiciary protection of its rights when things are not so positive, when you are still perhaps growing, but perhaps you have a dispute in connection to a potential breach of yours, or maybe someone is trying to cross the line with your business, and therefore you need to address the dispute resolution mechanisms that are available in the UK. And as many of you know, that here in the UK, we do have a world-class judiciary and trend-setting approaches by the English high courts and arbitration. And I think the good start would be for us to digest the information of ease of doing business that my colleagues were describing and clarifying, in combination with what the IT sector from Ukraine can expect from the UK judiciary system as the protection mechanism. And obviously, as the industry is highly competitive and the highly litigation active, because I do advise a lot of IT companies from Ukraine on various matters, including the crypto matters. The right assessment of the limitations of the judicial protection is something that any expanding business should be aware of. So I would take the same approach as my colleagues, and just to compare the EU versus the UK, because this is perhaps the most comparable jurisdictions and considerations for the Ukrainian business, which is growing. So to start with the Brexit, since leaving the EU, UK gained a greater autonomy to shape the regulatory framework. And that allows the UK government to prioritize innovations without unnecessary EU bureaucracy. I know a lot of Ukrainian companies are experiencing it at the moment, trying to expand very nearly to, say, Poland or Hungary, and they face like substantial red tape from the EU, and that red tape inevitably causes the judiciary issues, some potential breaches, and then those breaches may lead to disputes. And a lot of Ukrainian companies feeling exposed to local judiciary, which is not a particularly friendly environment for them, especially when you compare the same situations in Ukraine. So the UK government has made clear commitments to streamline the business processes, reduce the red tape, and create more agile approach to tech regulations. As and particularly Nathalie explained, we do have quite a friendly artificial intelligence environment now, and we expect quite a few things to happen very soon to clarify that environment in terms of regulation even further. And if you have that clarity, you reduce the risk of potential breaches, which may cause you disputes or may lead to disputes. So the UK currently benefits from the faster policy implementation timeline. So whenever you have the IT change in a global spectrum, the UK will adapt much faster. And for that to happen on an industry scale basis, the Digital Regulation Cooperation Forum and the Office of Artificial Intelligence were established by the UK government to actually engage closely with the industry to ensure the innovation is not stiffed and it's happening and not outdated in the UK. And this is quite a good starting point for your general counsels who will be setting up the corporate structures in other jurisdictions to look at, because those institutions are important. They set in the rules, and it's easier to understand whether you have any litigation risks or potential breaches which your business model in particular can bring to your business if you are moving to a different jurisdiction. So I think it makes sense, without boring you too much in terms of the underlying legislation, to explain 3 key aspects of the legislation, or key milestones of English legislation that you need to be aware of, and then to compare the same regulation to the EU, because that's the usual algorithm for Ukrainian business. So I would start with our main regulator in the financial sphere. It's FCA, Financial Conduct Authority. They have a digital. They are part of the digital support program, or innovation pathways, they sometimes call it, or innovation sandbox. That's another one. So it's a tech-driven fintech and crypto streamlined for the regulation in the UK as a matter of program that allows fintech and tech firms to test new financial products and services in a controlled real-world environment. So that allows regulatory flexibility and safeguards the fintech companies from potential breach of regulatory regime or law. Obviously, that helps the businesses to identify and manage the risks which may lead to potential breach, and work closely with the FCA how to rectify before the actual product enters the market. This is a very practical pre-market solution, which I don't think that EU can offer you. This is quite a bespoke to the UK. So it also allows IT companies to test new digital products like payment systems, credit scoring algorithms, robo-advisors as well, automated decision-making, as Nathalie explained earlier, in a live market environment. So effectively, you're running it by the FCA authorization before you approaching the market, and that significantly reduces the risk of being exposed to any litigation or any dispute or any problems with the breach of regulatory framework. Innovation pathways also offer the tailored guidance for tech businesses entering the financial markets. So in particular, they offer you advice on licensing, regulatory expectations and compliance strategies. Also something that the UK government is willing to provide for a new financial and IT products that are entering the market. And in Ukraine, we do have absolutely fantastic fintech products, like starting from Monobank and finishing with agri-tech, meal tech, all that stuff. So this is a very interesting and very innovative industries, but they are not necessarily automatically complying with the global regulations and practices. So therefore, to have that ability to ask the regulator to monitor your activity before the particular thing enters the market is priceless, because from the dispute resolution risk perspective, that helps a lot and reduces your long-term risks. One key piece of legislation that I would like to mention, and I'm sure many of you on this presentation are familiar with, is Financial Service Markets Act 2023. So it's FSMA for short. So it's a landmark post-Brexit piece of legislation, and it is relevant for the IT businesses in multiple ways. So number one, it's regulatory clarity for digital assets. It's paramount there. So you do have quite a practical guidance in terms of crypto assets such as Bitcoin, Ethereum, stable coins, which are now recognized within the UK regulatory perimeter. For the IT companies providing this crypto-related services, such as blockchain infrastructure, wallets, DeFi tools, exchanges, so that clarity that FSMA offers enables the product development without uncertainties. So you can develop your product without being worried about that the product will not fit a particular market. And this inevitable feeling that you're operating in the legal gray area. So the UK is trying to clarify that as smart and agile as possible, and FISMA offers just that. So the Act, just for completeness, the Act replaces the EU laws on the financial services regime. And in fact, the most recent amendment happened in May this year, revoking EU legislation from 14th of May. So for those who are not deeply involved in the crypto regulation and crypto world, I just saying that the EU regulatory framework is much more complex and much more restrictive in terms of pretty much all aspects of the crypto exchange and blockchain environment. So the UK now has our own sets of rules, and from my personal opinion, and I provided the comments actually on that to the Law 360 as of last week, is that the UK approach is much more investor friendly, much more pro-business. It's a light touch, and it's a framework which allows you to operate more freely. Not as free as in, for instance, in Ukraine, obviously, but much more freely if you compare to, say, jurisdictions of Netherlands, of France, of Germany, where everything is pretty much tight. So, in summary, the FISMA 2023, that's the act that your General Counsel will need to address if your business is moving to the UK. But the FISMA generally improves the legal clarity and flexibility for the IT businesses operating in the UK financial sector. So obviously not all of you operating in that sectors, but if you do offer financial tech, that's something to be aware of. Another thing that's also important for Ukraine, and I will just focus on crypto for now because Ukraine now represents the 5th largest crypto assets and digital finance market in the world, which is absolutely phenomenal for the country at war, is that the UK now recognizes the crypto as the third class of asset, and there is the initiatives running by this government to make it happen and implement it into law. And that obviously gives the UK Treasury a peace of mind that the crypto is actually now getting under control, and all the custodians who are trading crypto are now subject to the FCA regulation. So why it matters for the Ukrainian businesses that Ukraine, although operating on their own terms, to expand more freely into the stable jurisdictions with the stable currencies, UK now represent, I would say, the hub for crypto-related businesses on this part of the world. Obviously, we know that US is now moving slightly more chaotic and I would say more free. But that's not necessarily a good news for your customers and clients. And obviously that exposes your companies to a potential breach in future. The UK is much more controlled, but still quite open and quite free in terms of regulating and approaching a particular business models. So that's a piece of encouragement, I would say, for the crypto-related businesses and just generally a fintech. And the final thing for me, I know we are running out of time. So for the big companies that made their way to the UK, it's been a success. So I personally, speaking to companies like Uklon, Nova Poshta, MHP, which is the first agro business, IT-related agro business that been listed on the London Stock Exchange, and once they entered the UK market, they never look back. So initially it's quite unusual, challenging, sometimes expensive, but what the UK as a jurisdiction and a global G7 member can offer is clearly supersedes all that hurdles and problems. As my colleagues were saying before, the UK is now changing very rapidly under new government, and it represents a good country to be within. So thank you very much, and if there are any questions, obviously we're happy to address them.
Yes, many thanks to Kennedy's team for such valuable insights on doing business in the UK. It was truly helpful for us. Also, thanks for Asters to connecting IT Ukraine and Kennedy's. And I have an announcement for our guests. So if you have any question after this webinar, feel free to send them to us, and we will compile a Q&A document based on the questions received and share it with you, all our participants. So thank you very much. And we finish this webinar.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.